Hey everyone, RogueGold here, and today we've got some pretty interesting things to talk about regarding the Division Resurgence, which is of course the recently unveiled Division mobile game that is in development, and ever since its announcement there has been a pretty constant stream of new information and details that have been released, and those have come from a lot of different sources. And so what I want to do today with this video is compile some of the latest and most intriguing stuff that I've found and seen and present it to you all, because as weird as it is to say, this game is feeling more and more like the Division 3 every time I hear something new about it. And once I get into some of the specifics here, I think that's an idea, a notion that will further excite those who are already accepting and excited for this mobile port, yet will further anger those who have already vocalized their frustration and disagreement with this game's development and existence. Because some of the stuff we're going over includes how Resurgence's specializations seem far more in-depth and impactful than the ones we currently have in the Division 2, how they've refined, evolved, and mixed the Division's previous gear iterations to make what could potentially be a new favored build system, and how it could potentially be introducing game-spanning features and systems that have been long requested in the previous games. Big stuff. And so yeah, I wouldn't be surprised in the least when the reactions to this video are quite divisive depending on people's pre-existing thoughts on the mobile game as a whole. So that's what we're going to cover. Should be quite interesting. And one last thing I wanted to mention before we get started is that because all of this information has been coming out recently from so many different sources, I don't want to spend time in the video trying to explain which, came from where and who exactly said what at what time. So what I'm going to do is leave a comprehensive catalog in the description of source information leading you back to where I learned all of this stuff myself. Some of it is fellow creators like NGN, some is interviews, websites, Twitter. It's a lot, so just check it there if you would like to do your own investigations or searching. So without further ado, let's get into the fun stuff. And I wanted to begin with Resurgence's specializations, which was originally what I wanted to solely focus on for this video before I saw there was even more stuff to cover. But what I find so interesting about these is that they seem far more refined and impactful to gameplay than Division 2's specializations, which makes sense. Like this game has been in development for many years beyond Division 2's release. They've had time to analyze the feedback from that game and let that guide what's going on here. But again, it's just the fact that it's on mobile that makes things seem so weird. But anyway, let's take a look at what Resurgence's specs are going to look like. In the various snippets of gameplay released online recently, this was one that specifically goes into the specialization menu, and it looks super interesting. First off, as you can see, the game lets you choose your greater specialization, of which we know there will be 6 at launch, and a bit differently to Division 2, these look to funnel you into a bit more specific playstyles, where it labels Vanguard as a weapon and support class, Demolitionist as a weapon and skill class, and that's a very interesting distinction because yes, skills in the Division Resurgence seem to be tied to specializations. So, taking a look at the skills first, while I initially thought they were going to do a system where you choose between stuff like a heal and an ult in the same slot, which frankly I think would have been pretty cool, but I believe this just shows you your full kit, for lack of a better term, for your specialization, because you see the agents in the gameplay have access to all of these things at once. They just seem to be tied to specializations now, as opposed to being independent unlocks. So, for the Vanguard, you can see that you get a tack link, which is, aka the signature skill from Division 1, a mobile cover, a pulse, a concussion grenade, and a medkit. So, pretty standard stuff. But then, as you can see, they move over to the talent tree side of it, and this is where it gets quite interesting. The first thing to note is the introduction of subspecs. I have no idea what they will call them in-game, but if you look on the right side, there are actually 2 different trees, or 2 different focuses that you can choose within the greater Vanguard specialization. This one is called Commando, as you can see, and it looks to be the damage focus tree based on the red stat icon on the right side, whereas the other tree, whatever it may be called, looks to be a skill focus tree with the yellow stat bump. And this stuff is just crazy to me that we're getting this level of change in a mobile game before something like the Division 2. If you've ever played World of Warcraft, this is actually quite similar to how they have their stuff set up. In WoW, you can choose your overall class, whether that's a warrior, rogue, warlock, druid, whatever it may be. And so that may give you a certain set of base abilities and traits, but then shortly after you begin the game, you then choose your specialization, which is just another word for a focus within your class. And depending on which class you are, each have different ones. That might allow you to pick between a tank spec, a healing spec, a ranged DPS spec, or a melee DPS spec, and this looks to be quite similar to what the Division Resurgence is implementing here. You pick your specialization, which gives you, your base skills and abilities that at your disposal, and then you pick a subspec, a focus, whatever they call it, that refines exactly what type of gameplay style and build fantasy you want to fulfill, and I just think that's so awesome. It gets better though, because they then go into the tree a little bit and show what some of these perks actually are. The first one is a talent called Superior Firepower, and it reads, grants Relentless when hitting 10 rounds on an enemy in less than 3 seconds. Relentless grants 6% crit damage and 5% crit chance and lasts for 6 seconds. This can be stacked up to 10 times, talent cooldown 5 seconds. And again, this low-key makes me a little upset because this is exactly the kind of depth and intricacy that I had hoped Division 2's specializations would achieve from the beginning. Now, maybe the rework will finally give us that. We'll have to see once it drops later in year 4. But in fairness, like I said at the beginning of this video, this is just another example of how Resurgence is really proving itself as a kind of Division 3. It's taking the lessons of Division 2, mixing that with what they learned worked super well in Division 1, and now we're delivering this latest and greatest experience. And so despite the fact that it's only on mobile devices, I'm really excited for this. I'll quickly mention before we move on that they do show one other talent here. When you scroll down, you can see the Fire 4 effect, which reads, during Tactical Link, hits on enemies have a 4% chance of restoring the bullet and a 3% chance of granting 1 stack of Relentless. So clearly that's an augmentation and upgrade you can make to the Tactical Link skill, and similarly, as you can see in the tree there look to be power upgrades or some sort of enhancements you can choose to make for the pulse and mobile cover as well. So assuming they're implementing some sort of element of choice and not allowing players to pick every single perk on these trees, it seems like you really can focus on your setup depending on what type of playstyle you want to achieve and what skills you want to focus on. And so yet again, really excited to see what this looks like and how it shapes up even further down the line. That's not all though, however, and specializations are not the only category in which Resurgence looks to be evolving beyond the Division 2 in terms of its RPG core and gameplay offerings. We finally got a look at a high-end piece of gear for the game, which reveals some very interesting choices for how Resurgence looks to be tackling build making. So as you've probably seen in some of the gameplay, not only are we transitioning back to a single health bar system, which means that any armor in the game will presumably only contribute to damage mitigation of your health bar, which, at least for PvP purposes, I think is fantastic. It's a system that has the potential to work far better than Division 2's armor system does, in my opinion. But the gear for the game is also looking to be somewhat a hybrid of Division 1 and 2's systems. So here's a look at a high-end knee-pad. What do we notice? Well, the gear score has returned. You can see in the corner. There is an overall health value, which will contribute to your overall health bar, I presume. Armor is also present, but again, there's no visible armor bar that I have seen, so my assumption is that that just contributes to overall damage mitigation, similarly to how Division 1 did it. You then have your damage, toughness, and skill points like Division 1 did as well. As for what they will specifically, attribute to or be called, we'll have to wait and see, but super interesting to see those return. They're then taking a page out of Division 2's book by having the visual bar slider for stat values on the piece, easily showing, how good each individual role is. There are then talents back on knee pads, which I assume means you can get talents on almost every, if not every piece of gear, so that's really awesome to see that return. And then they then have set bonuses, which I assume land somewhere in between a brand set and a gear set. Clearly this is a high-end piece, but I imagine that if somebody were to equip 4 pieces with this Healing Elite set bonus, on the item, you would then gain some sort of extra benefit or power, probably in the vein of a stat boost or some sort of passive talent. So yeah, talents on more pieces, mods on almost every piece, new ways to make different sets, a return to some of the older stuff people liked, incorporating things people liked from Gear 2.0. I think this is just yet another example of how Resurgence is being the true evolution of Division 1 and 2. For this stuff specifically, we will need to wait and see and get a better grasp of how this build making system translates into gameplay and PvP, because, on first inspection, Division 2's Year 1 gear system seemed awesome, and then it had some notable flaws once people really got their hands on it, but it's a very interesting proposition nonetheless to see this happening, and in combination with the stuff that we saw with specializations, just the thought of how many different tweaks and changes you can potentially make to your build is really exciting. Alright, with those 2 topics covered, I wanted to move on to one final one, that being some of Resurgence's post-launch plans. So, if you weren't aware, every big Division project in development right now is being done by different teams. Massive Entertainment is doing Division 2, Red Storm is doing Heartland, and some amount of UB Mobile HQ in France, I think some other support teams as well, is doing Resurgence. And so by the time that each of these 3 games are concurrently on the market, assumedly by, some point next year at the latest, they will all be getting supported and having new content being produced for them simultaneously, which is exciting. But it also begs the question of, how will that happen? What type of post-launch systems and support models will they each adopt? We kind of know Division 2 strategy by now, by how they're, doing their seasons and title updates, but we now now know a bit about how Resurgence will be handling its, and again, if you weren't already a fan of this game, this is probably going to make you even more upset. As you can see right here, this one is from NGN, so shout out to him. Resurgence will receive post-launch seasons, which I don't think will always come with each of these bullet points every single time, but they are a representation of the type of content they plan to include on a regular basis, and it's kind of insane. So, we have a new main mission, a new class and manhunt, new battle pass, new exotic weapons, cosmetics, game modes, and expansions to the open world. So yeah, pretty crazy. In isolation, it's awesome to see that Resurgence is going to be getting this level of post-launch support and content, but I know that people's biggest complaint and frustration with this is why isn't Division 2 getting this level of support? And I mean, honestly, at the end of the day, I think it simply comes down to money. Frame it however you want, but mobile gaming is the biggest gaming market in the world. And whether it's from its accessibility or its monetization strategy, they bring in far more revenue than any console or PC game does. And so, while Division 2 is clearly profitable, otherwise they wouldn't keep making content for it, clearly it's not performing and will not perform at the levels at which Ubisoft anticipates Resurgence will end up doing. Otherwise, they would invest more into it and try and continually increase that return. So that's not really my opinion one way or the other on the matter, really just my interpretation of why I think we're seeing things play out the way that they are. But overall, those are some examples of how the Division Resurgence seems to be bringing new and evolved systems to the franchise. Some that, in my opinion, look to be surpassing the capabilities and potential of the ones we are accustomed to from the Division 2, and it's pretty crazy to see, but especially when we see stuff like the specialization system they have planned, it really just makes me feel like I'm looking at the Division 3. They've combined the best of Division 1 and 2, evolved the stuff that needed some work, and if done right, I wouldn't be surprised if Resurgence is used as kind of a template for a fully fledged Division 3, a few years down the line. Who knows? There's still a bunch of hypotheticals and unknowns at this point, but for today, my goal was just to showcase for you all some of the crazy new systems and features that Division Resurgence is bringing to the table, and I really hope that you all enjoyed. Thank you all so much for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and be sure to subscribe with notifications on to be updated every time I upload. Let me know your thoughts about all of this stuff. What is your reaction to seeing Resurgence's evolved specialization system, the new gear system, their ambitious post-launch plans? As I said earlier, I expect people's reactions to this to be quite in line with their overall positions, or opinions rather, on the existence of the game in the first place. But as I said earlier, I'm excited to see this stuff coming, even though it's going to be in a mobile game. Maybe there's a chance that if Ubisoft sees the positive reaction to it all, that will increase the chance of it being ported over to the mainline game someday down the road. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see, but for now, my surprise and excitement for the Division Resurgence just keeps on growing. That's going to do it for me today, though, everybody. Once again, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and until the next one, guys, RogueGold out.